Hey everyone, my name is Mark. Today I'm going to teach you how to play High and Low, which is a simple little card game that I designed, and it plays in, I don't know, 25 minutes or so, give or take a little bit, depending on player count and how quickly players are playing. So, I've created a virtual environment here to show you how to play the game. You can play this game at home though pretty easily. All you're going to need is 25 cards numbered 1 through 5, 5 of each. You can play with a couple standard decks and just pull out aces to use as ones, and then just have ace through 5 times 5 for your 25 cards. If you're playing at home, you're also going to need chips of a couple different colors to mark high and low. You're going to be collecting basically high and low markers, and I'm going to be using these handy dandy counters in my virtual tabletop that I have here today, but you're going to need something to denote that at your own table. And so if you just have like a couple different colors of chips or markers or whatever it is that you're using to show, oh, I've collected 3 high and 2 low, or whatever it may be. So, to play the game setup, you're going to take your 25 cards, you're going to shuffle them, and you're going to deal them out equally to all players. This game holds 2 to 4 players. And you can see my hand down here in the bottom left. Cards are hidden, so you can see my hand here for the purposes of teaching, but your hand will be hidden when it is dealt to you. And each player gets an equal number of cards, and there's always going to be one left over. And you're going to place that remainder card in the center of the table, and that is going to start the tableau that you'll be building off of. So you're going to be building a 5 by 5 tableau, and so basically 5 columns, 5 rows off of the card that you start with. And in a 2-player game, that means that you're going to be getting dealt 12 cards. In a 3-player game, you're going to get 8 cards, and in a 4-player game, you're going to get 6 cards. And you choose a start player, and that player places one of their cards orthogonally adjacent to any card existing on the table already, face up, and then you just continue around playing cards until the game ends when you've played your final cards. And so, for example, you could place here next to it, and then once that second card is placed, you could place here, or you could place here, or you could place here, and you start to get the idea. Now, you would not be able to place out here. It needs to connect to an existing card in the tableau. You can see also that I'm using these counters in the row and column where this 2 is placed on the left-hand side and on the top to show that it is the sum of 2. That's going to become important here in just a moment. So, for example, say I were to play this 1 next to it. What you're doing is you are going to be comparing each time you play a card, all of the rows and all of the columns on the board to see if you have either the lowest or the highest row or column, and then you're going to be marking that as such. Now you can, if you tie with another row or column and you're not the highest or lowest, or you're somewhere in the middle, nothing's going to happen. But for example, I just played this 1. And so now I will mark this, so this column becomes a sum of 1, and the row that I placed it into becomes sum of 3, just 2 plus 1. Now there is only 1 row at this point, so there's nothing to compare it to, so nothing's going to happen there. But in placing the 1, I now have placed it into what is the lowest column, worth 1, versus the 2 next to it. So over here on the left-hand side, on the lower of my 2 counters, I would move it from 0 to 1 to show that I have 1 low counter. And then you're going to be accumulating those throughout the game. So if we were to keep this same state and then it came around to me on my next turn, so in this case, say I played a 2 down here. Now we have 2 columns and 2 rows, so we can compare the 2. So let me adjust my counters. So this becomes 4, this becomes 2. And so now I have played into the highest column, 4 versus 1, so I would move up my high counter 1, but I've also placed into the lowest row, 3 versus 2, so I would move up my low counter up 1. So I went from 0, 1 to 1, 2 on a single play. Now that's not going to happen on every card that you play, and eventually it's going to actually be pretty hard to place into the highest or lowest column or row. So a lot of times you'll be playing a card that is neither the highest nor lowest row or column, and nothing's going to happen. Your counter will stay exactly the same. That isn't necessarily a bad thing, as we'll see in just a moment here when we talk about scoring. A couple important notes before I get to scoring though. The 2 that we started with, this card right here, it's important to note that that does not need to stay in the center of the 5 by 5 grid that we're building. So say for example we wanted to do this. All right, so the 2 is no longer in the center, and that's perfectly all right. But now we have 5 columns, and we can't build off of them. So for example, at this point, this would be an illegal play because we now have 6 columns. So I would not be able to place this 5 over here. We would be done building columns, and we would have to build up or down off of those columns. Okay, so now that I've explained the basics of gameplay, how does scoring work? Well, I'll direct your attention to the left-hand side here and the different players where I have created final scores for all 4 players in a hypothetical 4-player game. And your final score in the game is the difference between your 2 numbers. It doesn't matter which one is lower or higher than the other. It just matters what the difference is between the 2 of them. So for example, player 1's difference would be 1, 4 versus 3. Player 2's difference would be 2, 3 versus 1, and so on. And what you actually want is to have the lowest difference between those 2 numbers. So in this particular scenario, player 3 would win with 4 and 4, high and low, for a difference of 0. Now say there is a tie, and let's create a tie here where player 1 now has 5 and 5. So they did really well, as did player 3. They both have a difference of 0, and they tie for the win. Except the tiebreaker is whoever has the most total high and low markers. So in this case, player 1 with a sum of 10 between the 2 of them would beat player 3 with a sum of 8. That only matters when it comes to a tiebreaker. Otherwise, it is the difference between the 2. As you can see down here, player 4 also has 10, but they're 7 and 3, but their difference is 4, so they're actually in last place, despite having as many total as player 1 does. And that really is about it. So if you're seeing this on YouTube and you have any questions, feel free to pop it in the comments. And this game will also be live on Board Game Geek. If you just search for High and Low, you should be able to find it. And the full rules document for the game will be available in the files section of Board Game Geek. I will post a link to that in the description as well if you are interested in downloading that. But otherwise, I hope you have a little bit of fun with this light, quick card game. And thank you for your time. Take care.